I rolled up to my lake cabin, expecting nothing but the familiar creak of the porch swing and the whisper of pines, but instead, I found him some guy sprawled on my swing, sipping iced tea like he was the king of my castle, flip-flops on, shirt off, yapping away on a Bluetooth headset like it was his daily routine. "Hey," I called, hopping out of my pickup, shielding my eyes from the noon sun's glare. "Can I help you?" He barely glanced my way, just tilted his head and said, "Cool as you please. You must be the neighbor." "I'm Travis. This is my place now." My stomach dropped like a stone. "No, sir," I said, climbing the porch steps, my voice steady but my pulse racing. "This is my cabin. Been in my family since '82. You'd better get off that swing before we've got a real problem." He had the nerve to chuckle, standing up slow and smug. HOA president reassigned this place, said it was abandoned, unclaimed, so she signed it over. My mom handled the paperwork. Your mom. That's when it clicked. Travis, son of HOA Karen herself. That woman had handed my lake cabin to her own kid. I wasn't just stunned, I was shaking. That swing. My grandpa built it with his own hands. Those pines by the porch. I planted them when I was 12, barely taller than the shovel. And now, this cocky, sun-bleached surfer wannabe was claiming it all like I was a ghost. But I didn't lose it. I turned, walked back to my truck, drove 2 blocks to a quiet spot near the HOA office, and made a call not for a lawyer, but for fencing supplies. 3 hours later, a delivery truck, to hired hands, and a fire in my chest were ready to make a point. If they thought they could erase my family's legacy, they were about to learn otherwise. Which city of the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you've had any run-ins with an HOA. We'll narrate your story on our channel. Wanted to mess with my boundaries? I'd rebuild the boundaries, all of them. So, I started putting up a tall, thick black steel fence, not just around my cabin, but extending it straight from my property line through the road and right up against the sidewall of the HOA office building. By the time Karen stepped outside to see what the noise was, one of the posts had already hit her till a bed. She screamed, "What do you think you're doing?" And I just smiled. "I'm fencing in, well, that's mine." Karen turned red. Her hands flailed. "You can't block our headquarters." I grabbed the rolled blueprints I had filed 2 years ago and held them up. "Actually, I can." Her jaw dropped, but before she could say another word, the construction crew cranked the auger again, and the post driver hammered another steel spike deep into the earth, shaking the whole office wall. The last thing Karen said before storming off was, "You'll regret this, Mr. Palmer." I stared at her walking away and whispered under my breath, "No, Karen, you will." But what happened next? Oh, it would flip the whole town upside down. Let me take you back before the fence, before Travis, before the iced tea and threats. Let me tell you how all this started. Hi, I'm Mark Palmer, born and raised in Columbia Falls, Montana. I'm 55, a retired forester. My dad bought this lake cabin back in '82 with savings from his sawmill job. It's not huge, but it's full of history, tools, carvings, and notes on the wall from all of us grandkids. After he passed, it became my weekend escape. 2 years ago, when the HOA formed around the lake to preserve property values, I didn't think much of it. I was never against a little order, but I soon learned the hard way what happens when power gets in the wrong hands. The woman running the show was Karen Dwyer. Think Botox meets bulldozer. She smiled with her teeth, not her eyes, and always wore blazers like she was heading into a courtroom, even at the lake. She started with small things, enforcing quiet hours that didn't exist, yelling about non-regulation shutters, and leaving nasty letters when folks parked the wrong way on their own driveways. People grumbled, but most just ignored her. Me, I made a point to wave politely every time I saw her. Kindness, I believe, can soften the worst of people, or so I thought. Last fall, I had to fly to Oregon to help my sister recover from surgery. I was gone 6 months. I left the cabin locked, property taxes paid, and even asked a friend, old Joe, to swing by and keep an eye on things. When I returned early this summer, Joe looked nervous when I met him at the gas station. "Mark, there's something strange going on at your place." I blinked. "What kind of strange?" He rubbed his beard. "Don't want to start gossip, but I saw a young guy moving furniture in. Thought maybe you rented it out." I shook my head. "Never." Then I came back and found Travis. And now here I am watching this fence rise up a wall of iron and spite, slicing through their fake rules and cutting into the nerve of their operation. You see, when you've been kind your whole life, people think you're weak, but they forget. The quiet ones take notes. The kind ones build strength in silence, and the humble ones, we always know where the boundary lines are. But just when I thought the fence would be enough to teach Karen a lesson, something else happened that same night. As the crew wrapped up for the day and I was sitting in my truck sipping hot coffee, a black SUV pulled up behind me, headlights on, engine running. A man stepped out, tinted glasses, clipboard in hand. He knocked on my window. "You Mark Palmer?" I nodded slowly. "That's me." He flipped the clipboard around. "I'm here to serve you a cease and desist from the HOA board." I narrowed my eyes. On what grounds? But before he could answer, something wild happened. Travis burst out of the cabin my grandfather built, holding a hammer, shouting into the wind, "You can't take this place from me. My mom promised me." The man in glasses looked at him, then at me, and I swear, a tiny smirk curled on his face, because right there in front of the whole neighborhood, Travis made a fatal mistake. He admitted loud and clear that he knew it wasn't his, and that changed everything, but I didn't say a word. I just rolled my window back up, turned on the engine, and let the tension simmer because the real war was just beginning, and what happened the next morning would flip the HOA upside down. Where are y'all watching this from? Drop it in the comments. I want to know, because trust me, you're going to want front row seats for what comes next. The morning sun hadn't even burned the mist off the lake when I heard the banging. Not the gentle kind of knocking you'd expect from a neighbor delivering muffins. No, this was fists on metal. Angry, urgent. I peeked through the blinds of my truck where I dozed off for the night in the driveway just in case. 3 HOA board members, clipboards, ties, and clip-on badges like they were running a crime scene, stood on the other side of the fence had started erecting just the day before. "Mr. Palmer," one of them shouted, "you're in violation of obstruction code for B. Subsection 12. I stepped out of my truck and raised one brow. "That fence is on my land. I have the original boundary maps right here." "Not anymore," another snapped, waving a manila folder. "Karen redrew the lot lines while you were gone. This cabin is now registered as lot for 2A under Travis Dwyer. They really thought they had me, but I'd lived long enough to know when someone was bluffing." I didn't respond. I just walked over to the post where I'd bolted a small lockbox and pulled out my certified land survey. Stamped, notarized, county approved. And then I showed them the real map. "This shows the cabin and the full 2-acre property in my name. As of 2 weeks ago, it was reaffirmed by the county assessor's office." The suits went quiet. One of them turned red. Another flipped rapidly through his folder, frowning. I waited for them to admit defeat, but instead they threatened me. "We'll see you in court," one muttered before storming off. But here's the thing about court. I'd already been quietly. 2 months ago, I'd been getting strange letters from the HOA even before I left town for Oregon. So, I preemptively updated my title, ensured the property was airtight, and filed a quiet title action to prevent fraud. I didn't trust Karen. Something about her eyes always felt like a storm was coming. Still, the way they were reacting now, it was worse than I thought. That afternoon, I drove to town to meet with my friend Rick, a lawyer who owed me a favor, from way back when I helped him clear timber off his father's land for free. Rick was already sipping lemonade at the diner when I slid into the booth. "You were right," I said. He nodded, already opening a folder of documents. "They filed a quit claim deed under your name. Forged. Look here." He handed me the papers. Sure enough, it was my signature. But it wasn't my writing. Rick tapped his pen on the line. "Not only is this illegal, but if we prove Karen orchestrated this, she's looking at serious charges." My stomach dropped. Karen hadn't just given my cabin away. She'd faked documents to do it. And her son Travis, either he knew and didn't care, or he was blindly enjoying the benefits. "You think she's done this before?" I asked. Rick leaned in. "I'd bet my boots on it." I stared at the papers, my pulse thawing. "We fight back." And that night, I did more than that. I pulled out an old notebook, filled with my dad's property sketches and stories about how he built the cabin with his hands. I scanned every single page, every receipt, every dated photo. I made copies and dropped them off anonymously at every neighbor's mailbox along with a note. "What would you do if your home was stolen while you were helping family?" Next, "It could be yours." I signed it. "Just a neighbor who remembers what this lake used to stand for." And suddenly, people started paying attention. The next day, Karen stood at the HOA office gate, flanked by two officers. She wasn't in a blazer. She was in sweats, frazzled, screaming. "They're turning on me. Who left these lies in everyone's box?" It was chaos, but I stayed back, quiet, watching. Kindness had brought me this far, but now it was time to show the other side of the coin. Later that evening, while I was restacking firewood by the cabin, I saw someone sneaking down the shoreline. It was Travis. He was holding a bottle half empty and stumbling through the grass toward the porch. I didn't move, just watched. He sat down on the swing again, my swing, and began to cry. Actual tears. I didn't know. He mumbled to himself. She said it was a gift, that she could sign it over. I thought it was just paperwork. I stepped forward slowly. "She lied to you." He looked up startled, but didn't argue. I handed him a glass of water and sat on the steps. "You know," I said, "if you really believe this place was yours, you would have brought your own furniture." He chuckled bitterly. "Fair. I let the silence stretch. You can't fix what your mom did, but you can stop playing along." He looked down at the bottle in his hand, then tossed it into the lake and wiped his eyes. "I'll talk," he said quietly. "Whatever you need, I'll testify." It was a strange, heavy moment. But one thing I've learned in life: people make bad choices when they follow bad leaders. And sometimes they need someone to show them a better path. Still, I didn't let my guard down completely. The next morning, I got a call from Rick. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "Karen just filed a motion to condemn your fence." "What?" "She's claiming it's a public hazard. Says it's cutting off emergency access to the HOA office and is aggressive in design. And it was a fence." But Rick wasn't done. "And Mark, you should know. She just filed a restraining order against you. Says you threatened her with construction tools." I froze. "This is getting out of hand," I whispered. Rick lowered his voice. "I agree. But there's one more thing. You remember the county assessor who signed off on your deed last month?" "Yeah, he just got a complaint from the HOA claiming he was bribed." That's when it hit me. Karen wasn't just throwing wild punches. She was desperate. She was willing to ruin people's jobs, reputations, anything to stay in power. But I was ready, because what she didn't know was that I had already requested every single HOA financial record under public access laws. And what I found in those files would burn her little empire to the ground. But I wasn't going to release it yet, not until one more thing happened, because that night as I returned to the cabin, someone had broken in. My cabin door was ajar. Lights were on, drawers ransacked, and carved into the wall of my father's hand-built pantry were the words, "Get out or else." I stood frozen in the doorway, and slowly my hands balled into fists. Karen had just made a very big mistake, because now it wasn't just about the cabin. It was war. The moon was high above the lake, casting a pale shimmer over the water. But all I could see was the deep gouge in my pantry wall. Those 5 words that twisted my stomach into a knot. Get out or else. I didn't move for a long time. I just stood there in the doorway of my own home, boots still dusty from the road, my jacket heavy with dew. The night dead silent except for the soft creak of the porch swing moving in the breeze. They had crossed a line. Karen didn't just forge a deed or try to muscle me out with fake rules. Someone, maybe her, maybe someone she sent, had broken into my cabin, touched my father's tools, tossed my photos, and defaced the only part of this world that still felt like family. I checked the rest of the house. Bedroom drawers pulled out, kitchen knives gone, papers scattered like leaves in a storm. But what made my knees weak? The wooden box I kept under my bed. My dad's World War II medals was open and empty. Who steals? Another man's memories. The next morning, I didn't call the sheriff. I drove straight to his office. Sheriff Donnelly was an old buddy from high school. We drifted, but I knew he had a soft spot for folks who played fair and worked hard. He listened as I laid it all out, the forged deed, the fence, the ransacking, and the threat carved into the wall. Sounds like the HOA's gotten more aggressive lately, he muttered, rubbing his temples. But breaking and entering, that's a different ballgame. He pulled out a file. Funny you came in. We've had the other lake property owners report weird things. Missing garden statues, turned over mailboxes, even someone's windows left wide open after they'd been shut tight. I leaned in, and I bet they all clash with Karen. He nodded. Likely. I gave him my theory that she was retaliating against anyone who pushed back, that she had no idea how deep the mess had gotten because she thought no one would ever fight her. She picked the wrong man this time, I told him. He gave me a cautious smile. You're not wrong, but you better tread smart, Mark. Karen's got friends in high places, her cousins on the county board. I raised an eyebrow. That explains a lot. And that's when Sheriff Donnelly slid something across the desk. Just between us, he said. This was found in Travis Dwyer's car. We were doing a routine patrol when we saw him parked outside the marina, slumped over the steering wheel. It was a small flash drive labeled in Sharpie. HOA Karen 2021. You plug it in yet? I asked. He shook his head. Can't do that without a warrant, but you're not law enforcement. I took it gently, heart pounding. When I got back to the cabin, door, now resecured with a new lock, I powered up my old laptop, plugged in the drive, and there it was. Dozens of PDF files, scanned receipts, forged documents, payments from HOA accounts to strange businesses, even one labeled Lakeview Legal Consultants. But the bank records said it was a tanning salon to towns over. Fraud, clear, bold fraud. Karen had been funneling HOA money, our money, into shell accounts, and I had the proof in my hand. But I didn't rush to the news or the sheriff. No, this time I went to the people. I organized a lake neighbors potluck, inviting everyone from the lakeside community to bring a dish and meet at the common area near the HOA office lawn. No permits, no approval, just people and food and truth. That Saturday, over 60 people showed up. Martha from Lot 12 brought dialed eggs. John from Lot 6 grilled burgers. Even old Ms. Nancy from the East Cabins came rolling in her scooter with 2 trays of cornbread. I waited until the energy was light and the sun began to set. Then I stepped forward and raised my hand. Neighbors, I said. I wasn't planning on speaking today, but something's happened, something all of you deserve to know. Karen appeared from the HOA building just as I reached into my folder and held up printed copies of the documents I found on the flash drive. This is proof that the HOA's been stealing from us. Gasps, murmurs. Karen shouted from the back. That's a lie, but I kept going. I handed copies to those nearest to me. The receipts, the forged signatures, the payments to fake companies. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I showed. And people began to murmur louder. Karen tried to shout again, but someone shushed her. Then someone else stood up. It was Jeremy, the quiet fisherman, who never said more than 2 words. I voted for her 3 times, he said. I even helped her move her old fence. But this is stealing. Another voice. She fined me for a birdhouse. Another she threatened to tow my car while I was sick in bed. It was like a dam broke, and Karen, she ran, literally sprinted back into the office building and slammed the door shut. People were shouting now, not angry, but fired up. One woman asked, "What do we do next?" And I simply said, "We vote her out, and then we fix this place together." But just as things felt like they were turning in the right direction, something else happened. That same night, while I was walking back to my cabin under a clear sky and full moon, I saw a strange glow near the shore, orange, flickering. I ran. The closer I got, the clearer it became. My boathouse was on fire. I dropped everything and sprinted toward the waterline. Flames danced through the dry old boards, the roof already caving in. I grabbed a bucket, filled it from the lake, and threw it. But it was useless. Neighbors came running. Someone called the fire department. But by the time they arrived, the structure was gone, ashes, and just when I thought it couldn't get worse, one of the firefighters turned to me, holding something charred and half-melted. It was the frame of the last photo I had of my dad, holding me on his shoulders at that very dock. The flames hadn't just taken wood, they'd taken memory. And that's when I knew Karen wasn't just trying to scare me. She wanted to erase me. But what she didn't know was that sometimes a man becomes his strongest when he has nothing left to lose. By sunrise, the lake smelled of smoke and soaked wood. Blackened beams from the boathouse floated in the shallows like dead limbs. The fire crew had packed up hours ago, leaving behind yellow tape and caution signs. Neighbors had returned home whispering worried things like, "This has gone too far and someone could have been hurt." But I just stood at the edge of the dock, what was left of it, staring into the scorched remains like I could still see my father's shadow there, handing me a fishing pole for the first time. I didn't cry, not yet. Instead, I pulled out my phone and called Rick. "We're past paperwork," I said. "You sure?" he asked. "Once we move forward with criminal charges, there's no going back." "She burned it," I said flatly. "She burned my history." Rick didn't ask another question. He just said, "I'll file the motion by noon." Then I made another call, this time to Travis. He picked up on the second ring, his voice rough like he hadn't slept. "Hello. She torched my boathouse," I said. "You still want to make this right?" He paused. "I'll meet you in 30 minutes, he said. At the sheriff's station. When I arrived, Travis was already there, arms crossed, face pale, nerves jittery. But this time, there was no smirk, no ego, just a man who realized he'd been used by his mother in the worst way. Sheriff Donnelly sat us down and turned on a recorder. Travis started talking about how Karen had bragged about using HOA money to secure the lakefront future. How she forged deed transfers using an old notary stamp from a retired clerk she forgot to return. How she promised Travis the cabin if he agreed to keep up appearances and make the old man leave quietly. She never said to burn anything, he whispered. But she said, make it hard for him to stay. I think someone took it too far. Sheriff Donnelly listened carefully, scribbling notes. That's enough to open a formal investigation, he said. And Travis, if you're willing to sign an affidavit, you may be able to avoid charges. Travis nodded. I just want to fix this. It was a strange moment. Me sitting across from a guy who took over my porch swing, and now he was helping tear down the very woman who gave him the keys. When I left the station, I didn't go straight home. I drove down to the Lake Hardware store, bought the large tarps, and returned to the ruins of my boathouse. I couldn't rebuild it yet, but I wasn't going to leave it looking like a grave. As I knelt by the dock, hammering a corner of the tarp into the ground, I felt someone watching me. It was Miss Nancy from the East Side, 82 years old. Sharp as a tack. She leaned on her walker wearing a wide-brim hat and a floral coat. "I remember when your daddy built that dock," she said softly. "Used to let my boys fish off it while he read the paper." I smiled weakly. She reached into her purse and pulled out a faded photo. "This is from 1985. He gave this to my late husband. He helped pour the concrete base." It was a photo of my father standing next to the dock, shirt off, grinning like he just won the lottery. I didn't realize I'd started crying until she touched my shoulder. "Karen can't burn what's already planted in people's hearts," she said. "You remember that?" That night, I sent an email to every HOA member, over 140 addresses, attaching the evidence Travis gave, scanned files from the flash drive, and a single question: "Is this who we want representing our community?" I didn't sleep, and in the morning, the neighborhood erupted, my inbox filled with responses, some shocked, some furious, some apologizing for ever supporting her. Others demanded an emergency vote to remove Karen as HOA president. By noon, a petition had over 100 signatures. But Karen wasn't going down easy. She locked the HOA office doors, claimed it was under temporary audit, and worst of all, she filed a counter-suit against me, accusing me of defamation, unlawful fencing, and digital theft. Rick laughed when he read the suit. "She's flailing," he said. "We can prove everything's legit. She's just trying to bury you in court dates." "I don't care," I told him. "Let her dig. I've got shovels of my own." But the tension didn't stop. 3 nights later, someone slashed my truck tires. I found a dead squirrel nailed to my fence post with a note that said, "Old dogs don't belong here." I took photos, logged the evidence, and installed security cameras everywhere. Then came the final straw. On Sunday morning, while walking around the back of the HOA office building, I noticed something strange. The small garden shed behind it, the one Karen claimed was for emergency maintenance tools, was open. Inside, piles of files, unshredded, unsorted, unprotected. I snapped as many photos as I could. Gas bills sent to fake addresses, reimbursements to names that didn't exist, checks with Karen's name written twice, and that's when I saw it. A document titled HOA Expansion Plan Phase 3. My heart dropped. She wasn't just stealing. She was planning to take over more cabins, claiming they were non-compliant or abandoned so she could reassign them. Mine had just been a test run, and if we hadn't fought back, she'd have swallowed the entire lakefront before the year ended. I sent everything I had to Sheriff Donnelly and Rick. Then I called the local news. I didn't speak loudly. I didn't shout. I just laid it all out with receipts, photos, and witnesses. They aired it on the 6 p.m. segment, Lakeview HOA President under investigation for fraud and property theft. Karen's face was pixelated, but her voice shrieking at the reporter wasn't the final clip. Travis standing in front of my cabin saying, "She lied to me. She stole from the neighborhood and I won't stay silent anymore." The next morning, the town council issued an emergency hearing. But before that meeting ever took place, something happened I'll never forget. I came home to find the fence I had built gone, cut down, posts uprooted, iron slats tossed into the lake like trash, and pinned to my front door with a hunting knife was a single sheet of paper. "Back off, this is your last warning." I looked at the lake, then at the twisted metal floating in it, and I whispered to the wind, "You should have stopped at my fence," because what I did next would bring the entire HOA crashing down from the inside out. The knife was still vibrating in the door frame when I pulled it out. It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise, the kind of cowardly note you leave when you're scared, when you know you're losing, when all you've got left is fear and fire. But I didn't back off, I doubled down. I went back inside, opened my laptop, and uploaded everything had the cloud drive, photos, scanned files, audio clips, of HOA meetings, even Travis's full statement. Then I shared the folder link with 3 people. Rick, my lawyer, Sheriff Donnelly, and someone I hadn't talked to in over a decade. Janet McBride, a state auditor and investigative journalist, and my late wife's best friend. She picked up my call on the first ring. I saw the news. Mark, she said without waiting for me to say hello. Didn't expect to see your name wrapped in all this. You'll want to look at what I'm sending. 5 minutes later, she called back. Her voice was low, serious. Mark, this isn't just HOA corruption. This is state-level fraud. I can trace some of these fake companies back to a property scheme out of Billings. I've seen this before, and it goes way deeper than Karen. How deep? I asked. Janet hesitated. Let's just say Karen might have been a pawn. But someone's been using her HOA position to funnel money. Lakefront land grabs, shady development contracts, even illegal tax rebates. That hit me like a punch to the ribs. She's not working alone, I whispered. No, Janet said. And if we want to stop this, we need to make it public before they clean it up. That same day, she drove down from Helena. We met at the edge of the lake by the old marina under the pretense of a casual walk. Janet, with her short gray hair, dark sunglasses, and leather notebook, looked more like a detective than a journalist. I'll go live with the story in 48 hours, she told me. But you need to protect yourself. That night, I moved out of the cabin, just temporarily. I didn't tell anyone, not even Rick. I left the lights on, installed motion sensors, and parked my truck at an angle to make it seem like I was still home. Then I stayed with old Joe down the road. From his attic, I watched, I waited, and 2 nights later, they came back. At 1:42 a.m., 2 hooded figures approached my cabin. One carried a crowbar, the other a gas can. Joe and I watched in silence from the attic, our eyes fixed on the screen of my phone, streaming the live footage from the porch camera. They're going to torch it, Joe hissed. Not tonight, I replied, because I'd called Sheriff Donnelly an hour earlier, told him something might go down, and just as one of the intruders raised the crowbar to smash the window, floodlights lit up the yard. Sheriff cruisers pulled into the driveway, and within seconds, both suspects were on the ground, cuffed, caught on camera, and speechless. One of them was Karen's boyfriend, the other, a contractor whose name was on for fake invoices paid by the HOA for emergency landscaping. The sheriff looked straight into the porch camera and gave me a thumbs up. It was over, or so I thought. The next morning, I returned to the cabin. Nothing was damaged, but something was missing. The knife, the same one that was pinned to my door, the one I'd placed on the kitchen counter before leaving. Gone. That's when the real paranoia set in. Someone else had been inside. But how? I checked the locks. Nothing broken. Then I remembered something my father once said while patching the pantry wall. The smallest hole lets the biggest trouble through. I searched every inch of the cabin, and I found it. A hidden panel behind the closet in the back room. Loose boards where the old cellar vent used to be. Big enough for someone to crawl through. And tucked in that tiny crawl space, a folder stuffed with documents Karen never intended anyone to see. Blueprints of 3 other lake properties, all with confiscate written across them in red marker. HOA fines forged under the names of old widows who'd passed away years ago. And at the very bottom, a list of names, local officials, accountants, even a retired judge, all with checks beside them. Karen hadn't just created her own little empire. She was part of a ring. I handed the folder to Janet the same afternoon. Her hands trembled as she flipped through it. This is enough to blow this wide open, she whispered. Not just in this town, statewide. I stared at the lake. I just wanted to fish on weekends, I muttered. Janet smiled sadly. Sometimes life hands the quiet man the loudest fight. She aired the full report the following day. Not just on her local channel, she syndicated it nationwide. Montana Lake HOA corruption ring exposed stolen homes, forged deeds, and a quiet man who fought back. The footage went viral. Karen was arrested that morning. Travis was granted immunity. The entire HOA board resigned by sunset, but the most unexpected thing, that very afternoon, I got a letter from the state governor, a formal thank you, an invitation to a statewide council for ethical property management. But that's not what brought the biggest change, because 2 weeks later, while I was finally beginning to rebuild the boathouse, a small group of neighbors walked up behind me. They were carrying hammers, nails, lumber. One by one, without a word, they started helping. Even little Abigail from Lot 9 brought lemonade. I didn't cry, not until we finished the frame. And someone handed me a new photo, a print of the one Miss Nancy had given me, restored and blown up. "This belongs back here," she said, pointing to the wall of the new boathouse. We hung it there, center, where the smoke couldn't reach it again. But just as peace began to return, a black SUV rolled into town, unfamiliar plates, unfamiliar faces. One of the men stepped out holding a leather briefcase. He didn't smile, didn't knock. He walked straight up to the old HOA office and pinned a new sign on the door. Temporary management appointed by state receiver. Lakeview Properties under review. The corruption might be gone, but someone else was stepping in, and I had no idea yet whether they were friend or foe. The sign was bold, governmentist, cleanly typed and nailed dead center on the HOA office door. Temporary management appointed by state receiver. Investigation active. The town buzzed within hours. People gathered outside the building, whispering, speculating. No one knew who the new guy was. The man in the black SUV hadn't returned since. Pinning the notice, all we knew was that Lakeview wasn't done being watched. I stood back from the crowd, arms folded, heart uneasy. We had fought tooth and nail to bring Karen down. We had exposed theft, forged deeds, burned boldest, but now some stranger from the state was about to take over everything we'd built. I didn't trust it. That evening, I sat with Rick on my rebuilt porch, sipping iced tea as the sun dipped behind the lake pines. "They always bring in a state receiver after something this big," he explained. "Someone neutral to audit the books, review bylaws, clean up the mess. But neutral doesn't always mean helpful," I said, staring out at the water. Rick nodded. "That's true. Just be careful. Mark, you made a lot of enemies shaking this tree." The next morning, the man returned, black SUV, black briefcase, black suit. He stepped out, introduced himself to the town as Mr. Holt, a governance compliance officer from Helena. Tall, stiff, sharp as a blade. His eyes scanned everyone like he was reading pages we didn't know we were handing him. He held a meeting at the community center that afternoon. Everyone was invited. I went early, sat in the back row. Mr. Holt stood up front and cleared his throat like a courtroom judge. "There has been a breakdown in fiduciary trust here in Lakeview," he said, "and for that reason, I have been assigned to freeze all HOA activity until a legal and ethical framework can be reinstated." People clapped. He didn't smile. "During this period," he continued, "no building permits, no assessments, no fines, and no property transfers are to occur without my written approval. If you act outside of this, you may be prosecuted." The room quieted. Hall kept going straight-faced. "I will also be reviewing every property deed in the association, including those previously disputed or transferred in the past 3 years. That got my attention because that meant my cabin was going back under the microscope. I raised my hand. He pointed to me. "Mark Palmer," I said. "Do you have access to the documents already submitted in the investigation?" He nodded. "I do, and you saw that my ownership was reaffirmed by both the court and the county." I did. "So why re-review something already ruled on?" His eyes were cold, calculating. "To ensure," he said slowly, "that no bias, bribery, or procedural error occurred during the judgment. I clenched my jaw. This wasn't justice. This was control. He was here to reclaim power, not restore it. That evening, I called Janet, told her what was happening. She didn't seem surprised. Some of these receivers are clean, she said. Others just wolves in new wool. I'll dig into his background. But I didn't wait for the results. I started my own digging. I searched public contracts, state allocations, legal appointments, and what I found, Mr. Holt wasn't just a state officer. He'd previously worked for a private land development firm, one that specialized in converting lakefront communities into luxury resorts. 3 guesses who paid him. I printed the file, took it to Rick. He stared at the papers, mouth tight. If this is true, he said, they're not just here to fix the HOA, they're here to take over the whole lake. That night, my cabin windows were broken again, not with rocks, but with a brick wrapped in a piece of paper. Stop asking questions. The fear was back. The tension that Karen had wrapped this town in, it had a new face. The next day, Travis stopped by with a letter in hand. He looked shaken. It came from my mom, he said, holding the envelope out. I thought maybe you should see it. Inside was a typed message, unsigned, from a company called Golden Pine Developments. It thanked Karen for her prior efforts in transitional property arrangements and stated they looked forward to reopening discussions once the dust settled. I looked up at Travis. She was working a deal. By dawn, the fencing crew was already unloading steel panels from the flatbed. Same team, same foreman, the same nonsense guy who helped me run the first fence when Karen gave my cabin to Travis. Except this time, I handed him a larger blueprint. Go wide, I told him. Straight down the edge of Lot 17, wrap around the HOA building and don't stop until you hit the north irrigation channel. I want that building inside my perimeter by sundown. He looked at me with a raised brow. You know this is going to ruffle feathers, right? I smiled. Good. Let the feathers fly. This wasn't just about my cabin anymore. This was about every neighbor who got fined for a garden gnome. Every senior who paid for phantom maintenance. Every scare tactic and threat they'd endured under Karen, and now halt. And most of all, it was about showing them we still had power. Rick arrived an hour later, holding fresh copies of the revised property boundaries. He spread them across the hood of my truck. Based on your father's original land purchase, he said, pointing, and the newly approved court reconfirmation. This section here, he drew a red circle, includes the road leading directly to the HOA office. You legally own it. You're saying, I said slowly, I could deny them access. He nodded. You can fence them in, block their entrance, cut off water, even revoke electrical easements, and Hall knows it. But wouldn't they just challenge it? They can try. Rick shrugged. But by the time they win or lose, your story will have traveled a lot farther than Lakeview. And that's exactly what I wanted. I wasn't just building a fence. I was building a message. The crew drilled posts in a perfect rectangle, tall, industrial, jet black. By 3:00 p.m., they'd enclosed the HOA headquarters. Holt's shiny SUV still parked inside, the gate locked from my side. The state receiver, the man who tried to evict me, now couldn't leave his office without my say-so, and it didn't take long for him to notice. He stormed to the chain-link gate, yanking it with both fists. Mr. Palmer, this is illegal. You can't do this. I stepped forward, hands in my pockets. I warned you, I said calmly. You came for my cabin, you came for my name. Then you tried to push me out of a home I legally own. He was fuming. This is obstruction of state operations. No, I replied. This is private land, and until a court says otherwise, you're a guest in my yard. The town's people gathered, phones recording, neighbors cheering. And then the news vans returned. It made the evening broadcast. Retired Forster fences in HOA headquarters. State appointee now trapped in ongoing Lakeview scandal. But that wasn't the final blow. That came the next day. Janet McBride's report aired nationwide. A 15-minute segment titled The Man Who Fought the Fence, how a quiet retiree took down a corrupt HOA, and then the state itself. She showed the broken windows, the forged documents, the financial fraud. But she saved the best for last, the leaked memo, a confidential email from Golden Pine Developments dated 6 months earlier thanking Mr. Holt for clearing the path to future development rights in Lakeview and offering a 6-figure consulting bonus. The state receiver wasn't just a Volf, he was on payroll. By noon, the governor's office had issued a public suspension. By 3:00 p.m., Mr. Holt was escorted out of the fence property by state police. The gate opened for him one time. It would never open again. 3 weeks passed. The fence stayed up, not as a barrier, but as a reminder. The HOA was officially dissolved. Karen's trial date was set. And I became the elected head of a new Lake Community Council, built not on power, but on service. We rewrote the rules, tore up the fine system, turned the old HOA office into a community library and youth center. But the cabin, it remained untouched, sacred. I replaced the old porch swing, refinished the walls where they carved their threat, and hung my dad's restored photo in the entryway next to the Bronze Star and a small wooden sign that read, "Respect is the strongest boundary." One quiet Sunday, as I sat with my boots up and coffee in hand, Travis stopped by. He didn't stay long. He just dropped off an envelope. Inside was a note. For the tree I cut without asking, for the porch swing I used, without knowing, for the damage I didn't cause, but also didn't stop taped to the letter. A check. $1,000. I didn't cash it. I framed it instead because some debts aren't about money. They're about knowing someone finally saw the line, and sometimes that's enough. So, if you're watching this from a small town or living under a petty HOA president who thinks rules are tools for control, remember this: you can be kind and still fight back. You can plant fences that don't just protect your land, but protect your dignity. And if anyone ever tries to erase your roots, build taller, wider, stronger, even if it means wrapping a fence all the way around their throne. Because this was my home, and no Karen, not then, not now, not ever, was going to take it from me again.